Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the All Guardsmen party. It came to my attention that you all really liked it. As such, I will do my damnedest to try and make it as interesting for you as I can. So, without further ado, let us go back into the All Guardsmen party with Chapter 2, Dude, Where's My Psyker? Our story starts with Nubby and Twitch vainly trying to open up the locked exit to the shuttle after being told that their new squad contained 3 Psykers in addition to an assassin, tech priest, and the interrogator himself. Sarge is screaming internally as he remembered that the last Psykers he worked with accidentally summoned a blood storm and turned into a demon host the second they tried to do anything. Doc is captivated by the sight of a fat little man-child chewing on a seat's headrest. Heavy has decided that all this is all above his pay grade and is making himself comfortable by lying across a row of seats. The interrogator explains that this team is on the way to find out why the planet had not been supplying the Psykers to the black ships. One of the Psykers asks Sarge to stop screaming. It makes it hard to think. Current psychic phenomena count 0. Current perils of the warp count 0. But don't you worry, we'll be keeping track of these during the story. So no shit, there we were, stuck on a small ship with 3 Psykers on our way to perform a top-to-bottom search of an entire planet, all for the sole purpose of finding more Psykers. We did not have high hopes for this mission. Hell, some of us had serious concerns about whether we'd even still be sane when we got there. The journey itself wasn't so bad. Instead of being guests on a Navy vessel, our interrogator actually had his own small ship. Sure, almost all the space was taken up by our interrogator's huge-ass cogiter array. But at least we didn't have to worry about any Navy ratlings trying to take our weapons away, or bitching at us for setting up tripwire traps in the corridors. The problem was the people we had to make the journey with. We didn't like any of the Psykers. One was a smarmy tool who spent far too much time talking and making himself look pretty. Then there were the Weasley creep who constantly scanned everyone's thought and ratted to the boss. And finally, there were this psychotic man-child who would occasionally throw telekinetic temper tantrums. We called them Face, Snitch, and Nutjob respectively. Compared to these guys, the snooty social assassin chick and the incredibly antisocial tech priest weren't that bad. But the interrogator was infinitely worse. Our interrogator was Adept Path, and apparently some sort of data wizard. It took an entire ship just to carry all of his cogitators, and he loved those machines like they were his children. Unfortunately, the bastard wasn't a complete shut-in. Instead of staying in the dark with his cogitators, he constantly held meetings and forced us all to attend. Not a day would go by without him calling us together to update everyone on what little clues he'd found, or check up on how we were preparing for the mission, or lecture us on proper inquisitorial behavior. It was horrible. On our previous mission, we happily ignored everyone else on our team, while they happily did likewise. This time, we had an interrogator who had never used a gun in anger, giving us unwanted advice about combat drill, kit loadout, regulatory compliance, and frickin' etiquette. This was all done in a tone of smug benevolence. He understood that we were just dim-witted manual laborers who couldn't be blamed for not being as smart as he was. That's why it was his duty to do all of the hard thinking for us. The cherry on top was the snitch, who would report that we were thinking to the boss. Every time those lectures filled us with murderous rage, the little weasel would go and tell on us. Then we'd get a second lecture on proper attitude towards authority. God, Emperor, we hated him. Eventually we arrived at the planet, which had earned the Inquisition's attention by providing the black ships with nothing but pathetically weak Psykers, completely unsuited for any use whatsoever. There were probably dogs out there with more psychic talent than the strongest Psykers sent to the ships. But when the black ships had scanned the planet, there were no unsanctioned Psykers running around, so they took the pathetic tithe and left. Now we were here to find out where all the Psykers that should have been on the planet of this size had gone. The gist of all the little briefings we suffered through was that a disappearance on this scale meant that they were either dealing with corruption on the government, a massive cult, some kind of Psyker-eating demon, or Eldar.
Fucking knife ass.
This meant that unless proven otherwise, they had to assume that everyone was in on it. So until the interrogator got some sort of evidence, we shouldn't have any outside support.
Good.
The posh assassin chicken face did all the social legwork. They would circumspectly shake people down for information while we loomed in the background, or preferably down at the street at a cheap diner. Apparently they were very good at it, since everyone aside from us thought they were absolutely delightful to be around. At the end of each day, they would transcribe everything they found out and beam it up to the interrogator's process. The other information-gathering team involved a tech priest and snitch hanging around the equivalent of an unmarked van. They would spend all day driving and hacking wireless networks, scanning people's thoughts, and dumping all the information back to the boss in orbit. We got to drive the van and fetch snacks.
Nice.
But we didn't all get to leave the ship. One or two of us were always stuck at base, since it was apparently our job to babysit the not-job Psyker. And it really was babysitting too, because we'd had to clean up the mess he made, get food for him, calm him down when he had a hissy fit, and entertain him when he got bored and started pulling rivets out of the walls with his brain. Poor Doc got that job more than anyone else. He just wasn't very good at saying no. Aside from that though, it was an improvement over the trip out there. We were occasionally able to get away from our teammates, and whoever was backing up the social team got to visit some pretty high-class parties. It was always a nice opportunity to snag some good food, and in Nubby's case, pocket the silverware.
Nice.
After a while, the interrogator called us together and informed us of his brilliant deductions and masterful analysis. These involved money trails, newfound political power, falsified ship manifests, and other stuff we didn't really care about. It all boiled down to, someone in the government is selling the Psykers off-planet. Once our interrogator was done explaining his genius, he had everyone but himself rebased to a few floors of apartments, located in one of the largest cities on the planet. After the team was settled in, he sent us out to take a long, hard look at the bunch of nearby banks. We enjoyed being away from him and his constant meetings, and quickly turned the building into a proper guard barracks. Which is to say that Twitch wired up the place with dozens of traps, Nubby started fencing stolen goods out of the garage, and the rest of us built a set of barricades between us and the outside world, as well as between us and the rest of our damned team. It felt good to be home. Before long, the word came down that the interrogator had identified the operations banker, and the whole ground team was sent off to get some answers out of him. So while Heavy hung out in the van with the socially unacceptable members of the team and ignored the ugly little man prodding his brain and demanding candy, the rest of us infiltrated the bank. That is to say, we put on suits, which succeeded in making us look exactly like Guardsmen in suits, and marched behind Face and the assassin into one of the planet's largest banks.
Cute and cuddly now, Goyam. Cute and cuddly.
There was a little bit of trouble getting through security, which was entirely our fault. All of us kept our las rifles underneath our suits, and Twitch was still carrying a few det packs. We weren't very good at disguises. Luckily, between Faze doing some Psyker stuff and the tech priest's hack van messing with the security systems, we got in fine.
These are not the Goyim we're looking for.
After we were past security, Faze and the assassin greased a few palms and screwed with a few mines. Before long, we all sat down to a nice discussion and tea time with the banker. Well, they sat. Us Guardsmen stood around and looked ominous. Various falsified credentials were shown, psychic tricks were used, and a discreet uplink was attached to a cogitator. Then everyone left happy and healthy. We decided to exit via the back way so as to not trouble security again. And also because Nubby had wheeled out the tea trolley when we left. The boss and the rest were pretty excited about what had been found of the banker's cogitator. The next few days were spent in relative peace while the interrogator worked with the rest of the team to map out a web of corruption and bribery. This lasted right up till Snitch called us one evening and said that a large group of hitmen was moving through the empty floor below us.
Hurry.
We were locked and loaded within seconds and started laying fire into the hitmen from multiple sides before they even hit the edge of the perimeter.
Fire!
We had a good cover, good firing lines, good knowledge of local terrain, superior weaponry, much better training, and the element of surprise. It was a slaughter. The last 3 of them were pinned down by Heavy and Twitch, while the rest of us flanked them where everything went dark, and horrific screaming started. When the lights returned, all the hitmen, dead or alive, had been reduced to chunky salsa, and we could all hear Nutcase giggling upstairs. This killed the mood. Everyone eyed the Psyker nervously as we packed up our shit and got the hell out of there before the authorities showed up. We elected to exit via the garages and the cargo truck, while the rest of the team used the shuttle on the roof. None of us wanted to be anywhere near the Psykers after that show. Also, Nubby and Twitch didn't want to leave anything behind.
Your shit is another man's treasure. Take it or leave.
Psychic phenomena count, 1. Perils of the warp, none. So far, so good. We rebased to another almost identical set of apartments and went about guardifying it again. Except this time Twitch was given free rein on the entire buffer floor instead of just the entrances and windows. While this meant that entering our base via the main entrance took about 15 minutes and carried a very real risk of grisly death, we knew that people were actively trying to kill us. Also, we didn't want to depend on anyone who turned bodies into chunky salsa and giggled about it for our perimeter security. The rest of the team started using air transport exclusively after the assassin nearly lost a hand when she didn't follow Twitch's entry instructions correctly. After a few days at our new base, doing scan trips and otherwise laying low, Snitch found a young nascent Psyker, powerful enough to be worthwhile. So our team of elite inquisitorial agents started taking out a toddler. Our unmarked vans followed the kid day and night, from his hab to the daycare, to the playground, and everywhere else you might take a toddler. Imagine 5 heavily armed men all clustered around a screen watching a kid being pushed in a swing, while behind them an undeniably creepy bugger relays what everyone in the playground is currently thinking, and psychotic man-child picks his nose and mutters to himself. Eventually, our weird stakeout paid off. A bunch of suits showed up and grabbed the kid and his mother. So no shit, there we were. 5 Guardsmen and 2 Psykers in the middle of a playground chasing a bunch of G-men carrying a struggling woman and a small child. The woman and child was screaming, the G-men were calling for backup, and our Psykers were yelling about one of the G-men being a butler. And while we all had our guns, none of us wanted to open fire in the middle of the playground. Being a sprinter is a survival trait in any Guardsman. But right as we reached them, one of them slapped a button on their chest, and another one of them started to float into the air, as the surrounding area was covered with frost. We all immediately slammed into an invisible wall and were scattered across the ground, while Twitch stopped and started muttering to himself and gesturing. None of us wanted to be in the middle of a Psyker fight, so we flanked the invisible shield, left Heavy to cover the enemy Psyker, and resumed the chase. The G-men had gone to ground in a planescape and opened fire on us with small arms, but were having trouble because the child was apparently emitting random bursts of static electricity. We decided that survival was more important than civilian casualties and returned fire from whatever cover we could find. And since we were damn good at our jobs, things went pretty poorly for the G-men. We nailed most of them in the first few volleys, which convinced the last few to keep their heads down while we flanked them. Behind us, Heavy was laying stubber fire into the enemy Psyker's shield, and Snitch was pressing him hard. Then, with a little pop, the enemy Psyker disappeared. While Heavy and Snitch watched the spot where the Psyker had been, we rushed the remaining G-men. Our interrogator was helpfully reminding us over the Vox that he wanted prisoners, so we charged and beat the shit out of the last few survivors. Unfortunately, at this point, their backup arrived in the form of an unmarked government flyer, which immediately began to lay down some serious suppressive fire. This was higher stakes than we were ready for, so we bugged the hell out while the remaining G-men piled in with the kid and his mother. The flyer wasn't done with us though. As soon as its doors were closed, it lifted off and got ready to do a strafing run. We hit the dirt and dodged the first pass like true guardsmen, while behind us the enemy Psyker had reappeared with another pop and was back in the fight. This time the fight was over in seconds. The nutjob had finally caught his fat ass up with us, and with a little slurp, the enemy Psyker turned inside out. That was done with. Both the Psykers and Heavy turned their attention to the flyer, which decided that it was time to cut its losses and go the hell out of there. As we got back up from the cover, the interrogator called us to tell us that the assassin in face had successfully tagged the flyer with a tracer, and the tech priest would shortly be picking us up to assault whatever facility it landed at. Psychic Phenomena Count 3. Perils of the Warp Count 1. Apparently some minor detail about the G-men or the flyer finally gave the interrogator the evidence he needed to safely call in official support. After he was done bitching at us for not capturing anyone, or stopping the flyer, or whatever else we did wrong, our interrogator told us a squad or two of Arbites would be assisting us. Nubby was understandably nervous about being around what were normally law enforcement officers, and none of us were happy when the interrogator explained that he was only bringing in the Arbites because he thought we were incompetent. But overall, the news was well received by us guardsmen. More bodies between us and incoming fire is always welcome, doubly so if they had heavy armor and good fire discipline. The facility we landed at was large and grim, and obviously a shuttle port. Therefore, our job in this raid was to capture any available information about where the shuttles would be going. So while two squads of Arbites had fun cleaning the place room by room with judicious use of shotguns and shock malls, we kept a secure perimeter around the rest of our team as they uplinked cogitators and mind-scanned people. Aside from a few runners and idiots too dumb to surrender, we didn't have any excitement until one of the Arbite squads found the Psyker holding area. As the Arbites closed in, one of the G-men apparently decided that the situation was unsalvageable and released the Psykers. Under the cover of a dozen psychically gifted children freaking the hell out, they punched through the Arbite squad and headed right towards us, or more likely, the flyer we were examining. We opened fire as the heavily armed G-men entered the hangar and had them pinned in the hallway until Sergeant Heavy's cover got blown up by a fireball. Once again, we found ourselves caught in a Psyker duel. It was 3-on-3, and this time, Nutjob wasn't curb-stomping them. The fight seemed evenly matched. Our Psykers stood there and grimached a lot, and occasionally manifested horrible smells or small earthquakes. Their Psykers sat in the cover and did likewise. We didn't have a line of sight on any of them, and when we tried to toss in a grenade, it got slapped back at us halfway through its arc. We weren't exactly sure what to do, but after the fourth creepy occurrence, we decided it was time to use our initiative to end this shit before someone summoned a demon. Sarge appropriated a nearby forklift, drove it outside the hangar, and then we slapped a bunch of dead packs on it. We turned it toward the outside wall and the hallway the Psykers were holed up in, put in a brick on the pedal, and blew the entire hallway into rubble before anyone noticed what was going on. It surprised the hell out of us when the dust cleared and two of the Psykers were still there, hiding under a shield. It didn't last long after that. With a hellish bang, one of the Psykers shot up in the air and splattered against the shield, and the last Psyker immediately turned inside out. We could hear the nutjob giggling in the back of the hangar. Psychic Phenomena Count 8. Perils of the Warp 2. That was the last of the resistance. We poked through the military hardware that was left behind, while the rest of our team did inquisitorial stuff to the surviving G-men and the cogitators. After they were finished, we packed up our loot and headed back to the rest of the realm while the interrogator played with all the data we got for him. We were assured that before long, he'd know where the Psykers had been sent from the processing facility, and we were told to get ready to launch another assault as soon as he had a target. Being Guardsmen, we knew that the best way to prepare for an assault is to eat a good meal and catch as much sleep as possible. So as soon as our kits were prepped, we all hit the sack while the rest of the team watched the perimeter. This meant that we were all in deep sleep, with the exception of Twitch, who merely dozed off with his last gun pointed at the door with the safety off, preparing for when a second assassination team might go through our outer perimeter. The enemy must have seen the remains of their last team and decided that the Psykers were the primary threat, because this team had at least one untouchable with it. Unfortunately for them, untouchables don't do anything to stop booby traps. The whole team had slowly cleared a small path across the floor that Twitch had trapped and reached the big expensive security door that led to our makeshift barracks. They formed up behind their best infiltrator and got ready to storm the place as soon as he hacked the door controls. Then the door opened, and they had about 25 seconds to express surprise that anyone would tape several short fuse grenades to the inside of a top-of-the-line security door. This woke us all up, and Twitch being Twitch, he put an entire clip and 2 frags into the open doorway before anyone else was upright. He probably didn't hit anyone since the 6 grenade taped to the side of the security door had vaporized everyone near it, but he sure as hell convinced their rear guard to start falling back. Not that it did them any good. Before the rest of us were on our feet, Twitch hit the remote detonator for every single mine he had placed below us. The entire buffer floor was blown to shrapnel, taking the rest of the assassination team with it and setting off alarms up and down the entire block. Luckily, the building was non-flammable and studdily built, so aside from every rude awakening, no one really cared about what was hurt. Sarge decided that nap time was over, so we kitted up and waited for the word from our interrogator. Before long, it came. It pinpointed a rogue trader that was receiving the Psykers and carrying them off-world to slave markets. A joint naval and Arbite force would meet us in orbit, and we would board the trader before they made their escape. Our primary objective was to capture the senior crew members and find their contact within the local government. Secondary objectives included retrieving any Psykers currently on the ship, capturing the navigational financial logs, and not blowing up the shit like you blew up our base, or the Guardsmen this incompetent. Blah blah blubbity fucking blah. So no shit, there we were, on a naval boarding shuttle, on our way to capture a rogue trader and his retinue from a ship filled with captive Psykers. We were not exactly enthusiastic about our odds of survival. Rogue traders have a reputation for being, or at least employing, very scary people. Plus, an entire ship of untrained Psykers was a terrifying thought. Ours were bad enough alone. Still, we were Guardsmen. Facing certain death for unappreciative superiors is what being a Guardsman is all about. The pilot was clearly terrified, and the evasive maneuvers made us all nauseous. We had half expected to be blown off space before we got on the ship, but we landed on the hull without incident and cut our way to the interior.
Knock, knock.
While we did this, several of the Navy and Arbite shuttles were doing likewise. This was not a subtle attack, so it was hardly surprising that before we got 10 feet in, the ship's alarm started to go off. We knew our business, though, and mowed down all opposition before they got a shot off on us. The assault was going well for all of the teams. We'd seized the engines and main batteries, the main hangars were on the verge of surrender, and the tech priest was pretty sure he'd located the bridge. Seizing the initiative, he remotely hacked all the entrances to lock open so they couldn't shut against us. Unfortunately, these turned out to actually be the doors to the Psyker's isolation cells. The second he opened them, everything went to hell. Literally. Ghostly images filled the air. The frescoes on the walls started weeping blood. Unearthly screaming came from every direction, and a stench that put even Nobby's lack of hygiene to shame emitted from the air vents. Our Psykers moved forward to try and sort things out before the entire ship got sucked into the warp or something. But we wanted nothing to do with a section of spaceship filled with supernatural darkness and constantly fluctuating gravity. We still had a mission though, and since the psychic activity was blocking Vox communication, Sarge took the operational command. We needed to get to the bridge, which the rather embarrassing tech priest assured us was definitively just a little further past the Psyker halting area. Once there, we needed to find the rogue trader, subdue him, and hit him until he ratted on all his buddies. The problem was that even though there were other passages to the bridge that didn't go through the Psyker cells, the psychic spillover had turned that entire section of the ship into a no man's land. Just walking there would be suicide. But Sarge figured there was a safe way to cross the hellscape if only he could find the right people. Sarge was pretty sure that any ship carrying a bunch of unhappy Psykers would have at least one untouchable on board, just in case something like this happened. All we needed to do was to find where they were and convince them to take a walk with us. So we had our tech priest to do a quick scan to find out if any areas nearby weren't experiencing paranormal activity. Then went to go knock on some doors. Sure enough, we found two untouchables hanging out in the cab and speculating on what all the fuss was about.
I'm not gonna.
One of them tried to make a fight of it and got shot for his trouble. But the other one understood that in times like this, all men need to come together and serve the Emperor.
Fine, I'll help.
So we cocooned him in duct tape, threw him over Heavy's shoulder, and set off for the bridge. The walk was really quite pleasant as long as you ignore the dents, stains, puddles, and complete absence of any living creature. We waltzed right up to the bridge without any opposition, and found it locked down tighter than a sororitas convent when the guard was in town on leave. While the locked doors might have posed a problem for some of the other boarding groups, Nobby had helpfully attained several of the cutting tools that the shuttle crew had used to open up the outer hull. So with the tech priest's help, we found a section of wall which was much thinner than the blast door and started cutting our way in.
Cut yourself in.
Sadly, even with a breaching charge to help us with the final step, a last cutter is not quick or subtle. All we found in the bridge after we flashbanged the shit out of it and stormed in was a bunch of empty seats and a locked door labeled escape pods. We used the ship's Vox to contact the boss and explain the situation. After he was done bitching at us, especially the poor tech priest, he decided that given our lack of success, he would track the trader's escape pod instead of just blowing it out of the sky. We were to go get our damned Psykers back and get ready to raid wherever the trader finally went to ground. So with our duct tape untouchable in tow, we went back into the psychic no man's land and started sorting shit out. The DTU really trivialized everything. It was just a matter of walking up to the Psykers, having Doc trank them, then tossing them on the pallet Heavy was pushing. Occasionally we'd run into a minor demon or crazed crew member, or obviously demon host. But between the DTU and a liberal dose of Lastfire, nothing possessed a real threat. We eventually collected all the surviving Psykers, a few of them were inside out, freaking job, and found our 3 Psykers a little worse for wear, but ready to go after the rogue trader as soon as we knew where he was going. Psychic phenomena count 23, perils of the warp count 5. The pallet full of sedated Psykers was turned over to the Arbeit along with the DTU. We were sad to see him go. He was like a big sticky teddy bear that kept us all safe and happy. But he had to stay with the Psykers, so we handed him over to the Arbeit and headed for the shuttle. The interrogator voxed us directions to pick up the assassin, who had spent the whole mission getting her nails done or something, and report to an Arbeit precinct near some big government mansion. Our interrogator had used his incredible skills and brilliant mind to track the rogue trader here, and oh so cleverly pinned secretary such and such as the mastermind of this whole mess. Our job was to go in and capture the secretary and the rogue trader, so they could be used by the Inquisition to sort all of this without causing a massive scandal or minor war. So while the Arbites put up a very discreet perimeter, and the tech priest worked with some local engineers to quietly shut down the mansion's communications, the rest of our team planned out our infiltration. By this point, Sarge was done with everyone's shit and voted several complex ruses suggested by the assassin in face. Eventually, they just gave up, and the team was disguised as a group of heavily armed guardsmen and some dangerously unstable psychers. These weren't exactly the best disguises, but we felt pretty sure that everyone could act that part. Grumbling about obstinate guardsmen and stupid plans, the rest of the team dressed themselves up as officers and good old-fashioned sanctioned psychers. For our part, we tacked on the insignia of a local regiment and caught some sleep while the rest got their costumes in order. When everyone was dressed up, we walked right through the mansion's security, pretending to be a local general dropping off some extra protection for his good friend, the secretary. The poor sod was out of his mind with panic. He was calling in every favor he had to fortify his mansion, and we fit right in with all the others. Our credentials weren't even checked. As soon as we claimed to be reinforcements, we were waved past security and led inside. He even invited the general up to his office to personally thank him for his generosity.
Thank you a lot.
We walked right into the secretary's office and presented ourselves to him while the rogue trader stood behind him and stared at us boggle-eyed. Nothing good can last forever though. And after a few seconds of speechlessness, the rogue trader called the secretary a bloody idiot and opened fire.
Bloody idiot!
The rogue trader was a little late though. By the time he drew his weapon, the assassin had grabbed the secretary, and we had already killed several bodyguards. We signaled the Arbites to move in, grabbed some cover, and started a two-way firefight between the trader and security reinforcements. We had him well pinned, and had started to flank him when the far door burst open, and the trader's retinue entered the fight. Two of them were already glowing. Once again we found ourselves stuck in the middle of a damned Psyker duel. Meanwhile, the Arbites moved in to detain everyone, and without the direct orders from the secretary, none of the secretary forces felt inclined to argue with the Arbites' APCs. Back inside, Heavy was mowing down reinforcements with his stubber. Twitch was nailing anyone who left cover, and the rest of us were steadily advancing to the trader and his psychers. Surprisingly, the two enemy psychers were holding off all three of ours. And aside from a few phenomena, neither side appeared to actually be doing anything. Eventually, our slow advance got us a good shot on the trader and his retinue, pushing the psychers to try something desperate. Face collapsed, but one of the trader's psychers burst into flames, taking a pair of retainers with him. In response, Notjob and Snitch doubled down on the last psyker, until suddenly Notjob felt the ground screaming, and one of the last retainers did likewise. Suddenly, the retainer got to his feet and tackled the last enemy psyker to the ground and started beating the shit out of him while giggling. While we all watched this, Notjob got to his feet, drew his sidearm, and shot Heavy in the back of the head. A second shot was fired at Twitch, but a quick dodge saved him. Unfortunately, the second he stopped covering the trader, a round hit him in the back. While this happened, Sergeant Nobby dropped to the last retainer, and the trader disappeared with a loud crack. Immediately afterward, the enemy psyker stopped moving. Doc ran toward Twitch and Heavy, and both the possessed retainer and Notjob collapsed again. While Doc started patching up Twitch, Snitch collapsed in exhaustion, and Nobby headshot the psyker and the retainer that had been attacking him. Sarge scanned the room for the trader, and with a tired giggle, Notjob began to sit up. Immediately, the injured Twitch drew his sidearm and emptied an entire clip into the little bastard. No one commented on this. Sergeant Nobby slowly approached the door to the bathroom attached to the office. Right as they reached it, a voice from inside announced, I would like to surrender to the Inquisition and put myself and my ship at their disposal in this current investigation. Both Sarge and Nobby ignored this and started prepping a breaching charge. Before they finished, they heard the assassin, who had been hiding with the secretary behind a filling cabinet. Calm the interrogator and tell him that the target had been captured and the trader was surrendering. The interrogator ordered Sarge to accept the gentleman's surrender and escort him to the shuttle. With a heavy sigh, Sarge removed the charge and relayed the message.
Transport him to the ship.
After a few seconds, the rogue trader opened the door and smugly declared,
I knew we could work together. This was such a tragic misunderstanding.
Whereupon Nubby yelled,
He's got a gun!
and Sarge blew his head off. The interrogator
Why did you do that?
was not happy.
Fuck you!
That was the end of our part of the investigation. Doc got Twitch stable and patched everyone else up, while Sarge collected Heavy's body and Nubby looted the corpses. It was a sort of awkward sitting there, waiting for the all clear from the Arbites. The secretary was moaning and crying in a very annoying way, and the rest of the team kept shooting us death glares while they struggled to restrain him. We offered to help, but they refused for some reason. The mood was not improved by Nubby making some truly horrific noises as he tried to pry something out of the trader's corpse. In the end, he had to borrow Doc's bone saw. Eventually, the Arbites finished cleaning the mansion, and the team escorted us back to their precinct. A flyer came and picked up the secretary, along with the assassin, snitch, and FaZe, and hauled them off to some secure facility somewhere. We weren't told anything. We were definitively on the interrogator's shit list. Final psychic phenomena count, 28. Final perils of the warp count, 7. We hung out with the Arbites for a few hours, and they were nice enough to give us some food and help suit Twitch up while we waited. After a while, Shuttle came for us, as well as, to our surprise, the tech priest. He took us to the interrogator's ship. The ride up was pretty somber. Heavy was dead. Both his and Nutjob's corpses were in the hold, and we knew the interrogator was furious with us. Not even Nubby's jokes about the ceiling price of second-hand gold teeth or his reenactment of the rogue trader's death could cheer us up. When we got back out to the ship, we were treated with a long lecture about how our incompetence had ruined the interrogator's carefully laid plans. We were told how Sarge's disobedience had removed a vitally useful source of information, how our poor decision-making had killed a valuable teammate, and how the tech priest's mistake on the ship had jeopardized the entire mission. He also made several remarks about our general behavior, attitudes, hygiene, and education. Then finally pointed out that if we ever had acted as professionally as the rest of the team, Heavy would still be alive. If the bastard didn't have the remote control of the ship's security services, Sarge would probably have killed him. In the end, we were ordered to pack up and return to the shuttle. We will be returning to Oak's ship on a naval transport, while the interrogation was finished with the aid and the Arbites on local AdMech. A secure data slate containing a summary of the investigation so far, as well as detailed critique of our performances, was sent along with us. It came with a direct warning that Oak would be expecting the slate, and any attempt to accidentally lose it would go poorly. So we packed up our gear and Heavy boarded our shuttle. However, as our final afterthought, we propped Nutjob's corpse upright in the bathroom, where it would hopefully scare the shit out of that damned interrogator. The trip back was a lot better than the trip out. None of the Navy boys bothered us, and we bonded with the tech priest over our mutual hatred of the bastard interrogator. So aside from Sarge's usual drills, we mostly just lounged around and came up with ideas of how to change the report after the tech priest finished hacking the secure data slate. Very few pieces of technology can resist a tech priest with a month of travel time on his hands. Before the trip was even half done, he had cracked it open and ready for a little judicious editing. There was a strong sentiment to wipe the whole thing and replace it with a picture of a butt and a note that said blah blah blah, I'm a gigantic tool, blah blah blah, but cooler heads prevailed. we simply removed all negative references to ourselves from the report, and rewrote the disciplinary note to simply say that we no longer were needed, and were being released back to Oak. As an afterthought, we went through the entire report and dialed the interrogator's self-praise to 11. We hoped it would help him come off as a complete tool to anyone who would read the report. Eventually we arrived back at Professor Oak's giant spacefaring inquisitorial school, which was currently orbiting some random agri-world. We dropped off the data slate, got debriefed, and went to find our fellow guardsmen. Sure enough, there were a few of them holding down a little section of the ship that were claimed back when we arrived. We got together, shared some stories, and planned a suitable funeral for Heavy. We called up the tech priest and found our other cogbros still hanging out in engineering, so we invited them both down to the planet with us, then got Heavy out of the storage, requisitioned a shuttle, and headed down to the agri-world to give him a proper send-off. In the morning, the cogbros helpfully hauled all of our hungover asses back into the shuttle and got us back aboard before anyone noticed we had left. That done with, we settled in a few well-deserved weeks of R&R. On some days, a squad would come back with tales of success or failure, and occasionally missing a few men. On other days, a runner would come down, and a squad would head out, or a new one would be pieced together. Eventually, the squad's R&R ran out, so we packed our bags and waited for the runner to come for us. The runner didn't come, though. Instead, one day as we lodged in our makeshift barracks, a tall man ducked into the room. He wore dress greens and positively reeked of officer. In a chipper voice he greeted us and invited our squad and that strapping young fellow with the sword to join him in a little expedition. He said it was going into a combat zone and thought that we'd enjoy a chance to get back into action and solve a few little military problems that are right up our alley, woot woot. So with a weary sigh, we gathered up the one man in the regiment dumb enough to prefer a sword over a good old-fashioned lasgun, and followed our new interrogator to the shuttle. Thank you all for listening. Sorry for the long wait time, this one took a little bit longer than expected to make. But in order to make up for this, I aim to make a double upload this week, and expect something really nasty to be talked about. Other than that, please like and subscribe and share the video around to anyone that might be interested, and I will see you guys soon. Cheerios.